Good evening, this is Robert Sidell. Great pleasure to be with you here on this Sunday evening in March, the very first Sunday of March 2024. And it's a pleasure to be with you here on the number one talk station in Las Vegas, and also simulcasting on Facebook, and also simulcasting, well, not actually simulcasting, but my recordings are also being put on YouTube. So you can just go to YouTube and type in Miracle Podcast Sidell or Gateway Podcast Sidell, whatever. You'll pull it up, and if you want to watch these recordings later on, you missed the show, you're welcome to do that. You can also watch the recordings later on Facebook too. So they're normally also there. Hey James, it's good to see you. It's nice to see you tuning in bright and early on this in our recording tonight. So our show tonight. It's a real pleasure to be with you here on this Sunday evening. It's interesting. It's funny about life. This has been a windy weekend here in Las Vegas. It's mostly starting yesterday. And it's just a reminder to me, where I live, like we had one tree blow over, and also one of my fences blew over too. So I'm going to have some work done on that. It's just a reminder to me, and yet I was thinking to myself, think about the people that live where there are hurricanes. Well, and as a lot of you know, hi Debbie, how you doing? It's been a big storm up in Northern California too. By the way, I want to say one thing to you, that just to be aware of when you're watching news media. I've been watching a couple of stories about the weather in New York, not New York, in Northern California. And hey, Diane, nice to see you there. And one of the things they always say, because it's just the way the media is, they always want to catastrophize things and make them seem worse. I mean, it is truly a serious storm, so I'm not minimizing that. But the way they describe a storm is if it's this mean creation that's working on trying to destroy you, and it's just strong and powerful, and it's going to take you over, because it sounds more dramatic that way. So it's important for all of us to, yes, there is a storm. No question about it. There's always been storms. There were before. The Donner's Pass, where they were saying some of the storm was very strong, is also a place where a group of settlers got caught, it was over 100 years ago, and it turned into a very bad situation. They got snowed in for months, and it's a very famous and negative story. Well, it depends how you look at it. It also is positive because some of the people survived, and that was good. But the point I'm getting at is, I'm not trying to say there aren't real things, but when we try to project on storms and weather like they're somehow attacking you or something, it just conspires to create a more anxious state in life. And I'd rather just say we're in a world that has weather. Things change. Like I said, I had a tree blow over yesterday. I had a fence that is going to have money spent to fix it. And I got to listen to some really howling winds last night, as I know a lot of you also did. And it's just a reminder to me, it's part of being alive on this earth, is that we live in a world that is changing, somewhat unpredictable in all sorts of different levels. And then it's up to us to see how to handle those situations that come into our world that we may not have expected or hoped for or wished for. But it's still up to us to decide how to have the best possible response. By the way, one of my friends gave me this little saying once, and I like it. You aren't in charge of what comes into your life. You may have some influence on that, but what you are in charge of is your response to it. So the saying goes, is your response is your responsibility. And so that's where we have some choice, right? So whatever happens in your life, like me having a tree blow over, my fence blow over, I could go, woe is me, this is terrible, whatever, or I could say, well, I'm just glad that's all it was. And in other words, I have choice in the response. And that's true for all of us. That's true for every one of us that are listening now or later. And that's our biggest hope, really, that we can choose to respond. I was at Costco and I was talking to a lady tonight, and I gave her one of my Expected Miracle cards. One of the ladies giving out samples. And then I walked by again a minute or two later. She goes, I needed that so much. Where can I get your book? And I told her, so I'll tell all of you, you can get it on Amazon.com. And it is there. It's called The Gateway. I was just looking for a copy of it to show you. Oh, yeah, here it is. Here it is, right here. Here's a picture of it. This book can and will change your life if you're open to it. It's up to you. All of life is a do-it-yourself project. You could give anybody the best tools in the world, and it's not going to do any good if they don't use them. And that book is a tool to work on finding what's good for you, just like it's a tool that helps me find what's good for me. But and I use the tools in there every single day of my life, ever since that book. I got a chance to create that book, write that book. So in any event, actually, let me go ahead and put a little bit of background music on. So wherever you are right now, my friends, I just want you to know that I'm really open to the idea that right now, this moment of life, tonight, can be a step forward into a new possibility of life. I always pray to God, and I was saying this today to God in my prayers. I said, God, what could I do today that could make a difference in other people's lives? What could I do that could elevate not just you that are listening, but our city, our nation, our world? Obviously, the world, I was just talking to a minister about an hour ago. I went to a nice little concert at his church, and he was, one of the songs there was a famous song from Les Miserables about dreams and also when dreams don't come true. And I was saying, boy, that song is actually kind of dark in a way because it leads you to a sad part of life, which was the intention of that musical. And we were both saying, yeah, that's true. I said, so he just said to me, life is good. I said, so how do you maintain a state of mind that life is good in the midst of challenges? And I think that's the opportunity for all of us. How do you and I maintain a positive state of mind in the midst of a world that doesn't perform or act, or people don't perform, act, or do what you might think is appropriate? How do you do that? And that comes back to this notion that our response is our responsibility. So he and I were talking about that, and I think there's not a real simple answer to that, except to me, that's where we have to work on love and the power of transformation in our own lives, our own relationship to God, and several tools that I'm going to go over during this show. So tonight, that is the topic. How can we transform our lives with love? And how can we transform the world with love? You know, I'm a pretty good student. I'm a member of 3 state bars. I graduated with honors from a top law school in the United States. So I'm a good student, okay? And so what I've done over since I graduated from law school, and I actually some before that too, but I have studied most of the great wisdom teachings of the world, and I look at the world right now and I say, you know, there's a lot of challenges in this world. And part of the reason why it seems that way, though, more than ever, is because we have the internet bringing it to our face all the time. You know, 50 years ago, we didn't have that. It wasn't constantly being poured onto us all the time. So that's part of the challenge for all of us. But still, my friends, what I would like to suggest is that if we want to walk into a happy future, if you want to know a happy future, it's incumbent on you and me to come into a new understanding of love, a deeper understanding of love than we've ever known before. And that's what really hit me. This is not new to me, but I'm getting more clear in my own life. I'm getting much more clear. Whoops, looking for me? Hold on just a second here. Okay, well, in any event, I'm getting more clear from moment to moment that what's going to be is up to us. And if we're willing to find a deeper dimension of love, a deeper dimension of grace, then guess what? It's up to us. It's up to each and every one of us. And maybe that's exactly the plan, God's plan for each of us. And the world is a heaven. The physical world is a heaven. And then on top of it, the chance to live in this world is a heavenly gift. At the same time, that isn't to say there aren't times when it's a very difficult, painful experience. And so the question then is, for all of us, how in the midst of that can you and I serve God and the world and life? And what I would tell you is, we can serve by being part of the answer, by living in love, living in grace, living in healing, and starting to share that with the people around you. Give them hope, so you could become a bestower of hope in the world, a bestower of light in the world. That's my invitation to each one of us, that you and I become bestowers of light and of grace, bestowers of light and grace. So that's the chance that you and I have to look at the world, the same world everybody else is looking at, but to see a higher possibility. That's the invitation we all have. And that takes courage. It takes great courage. But tonight, that's what I want to focus on for all of us. You and I can help co-create a much, much better world. And part of it is just simply through the power of grace and healing, right through the very power of this show. You and I can collectively send love and grace and peace into this world. you and I can literally send a healing prayer into the wavelengths of this world and contribute to a higher and happier and better expression of life and love. So if that sounds good to you at all, if that sounds appealing to you at all, I invite you to stay tuned tonight, because I just want to go deeper and deeper into that love place. But what I really want to say about divine love, the divine love I'm talking about is a greater thing than we might have ever known. It's a love that is not just tied to one person or thing. It's literally an experience of the divinity of life itself. And when you start to get filled with that love, your very life goes from the ordinary to the extraordinary. It goes from the mundane to the magical. And that's what's possible in this life. And hey, Christine, I haven't seen you for a while. Nice to see you on there. And so my invitation to each one of you that are listening tonight or listening later on the recordings, you are created in the image of God, for lack of a better way to describe it. You have access to extraordinary potential, divine potential, much more than you might normally think. And that's the great puzzle of this existence. We all have dormant potentialities within us that are so much beyond than what we could ever imagine. So I invite each one of you tonight, stay tuned with me tonight. Let's awaken each other to that dimension of love. Let's live in that dimension of love, and let's send that dimension of love out into the world. So we're going to go to a break now. This is Robert Sidell. It's the Gateway Show. Stay tuned. I'll be back in just one moment. And I'll keep working with you on Facebook. It's great to see all of you there on Facebook. I'll be with you right now. Stay with you right now, I mean. Hold on, I got to check one thing. So my friends on Facebook, I had to check. I heard a noise. It was actually my dog back there, which is nice. I have a very nice dog. You know, I truly, really, sometimes I think to myself, you know, there's a higher plan to this life, and you and I can be part of it. Not only can be, we are part of it. The question is, are you willing to dream and know that you can be a living expression of God's infinite love? Are you willing to know that? Are you willing to be that love? Are you willing to live it in your daily life as much as you can? Are you willing to become an emissary of divine light wherever you go? Are you willing to be a teacher of grace by the very method of your life? Are you willing to practice kindness and joy and love and bring that into as many relationships as you can? By the way, we don't have to be perfect in that. Nobody's perfect. Are you always going to be in the best mood? If somebody cuts you off, it could affect your mood. It's funny. When I drive, usually that's not one of my issues, but I know it is for a lot of people. That they feel like sometimes people don't drive right or this or that. And of course, in my personal injury, I'm a personal injury attorney, so I certainly see a lot of those clients that have experienced that. So I do know what that's all about. So my friends, I invite you right now to open yourself to a new beginning, new magic, new love, like falling in love. I invite you tonight to open yourself into falling in love again. Falling in love with life, with existence, with your own self, with the people in your life. Leroy's written something here. I guess you're saying you have a personal disability which you choose to ignore because I guess it sounds like you have Alzheimer's. Well, that's what you got to do, Leroy. I'm sorry to hear that, but and I'm sure that isn't easy for you. But don't give up. I have a good friend that has Parkinson's disease, and you got to trust that there are answers coming to you that you wouldn't even guess right now. By the way, you might check out hyperbaric chamber. Hyperbaric. That's something I was going to check out this year myself. That's a higher pressure oxygen, which they find helps people's brains. Okay, we're going back on the... Here we go, my friends. Good evening, my friends. It's another magical night on the Gateway Show, a March night, and it is magic. Even when it's windy, I enjoy it. Although, like I said, sometimes it could cause some damage. But it's just magical. I mean, the energy's alive. I was driving along today, and there was kind of a mist around the mountains, and it was very, very beautiful. And we live. Yeah, falling in love takes courage, says Marianne. But without love, life isn't the same. Marianne, I want to talk about what you're saying for a second. I've been talking to my son about this. One of my sons that's, working on some relationships. Let's just say that. And I said, and I was even saying this to my wife. If you do open yourself to love, and you find a deep love, which I'm very fortunate to say I have in multiple parts of my life, but let's just say my marriage right now, there's a price. There's a price for that. And it takes courage, because when you really open your heart to a deep love, you don't know how long this person's not going to live forever, and you're not either. So you're putting yourself in a position where you may experience something very deep and profound, and then when that person passes, it can leave a void in your life it's hard to replace. Matter of fact, I know, Marianne, you went through that years ago yourself, but my point is that what's the choice? I was saying this to my son. What's the alternative? You either open your heart to discovering a true, life-changing love, and live with that reality that could change your life, even in painful ways, if that person passes out of your life. That's alternative one, to gamble and open yourself to the full enchilada of fantastic love. Alternative two, you put a wall around your life and never let love in. I don't know about you, but I would choose path number one. Why live in this world without really going for the full power and grace and awakening that's possible in this life? And that's my dream. And even in not just in a personal relationship, but my relationship to God. It's like I'm now 70 or 71 actually, and I don't want to wait. I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday. I don't want to wait till whenever the end of my life might come and say, God, okay, now I've got a week left, God, I'm really going to do what, was in my heart. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to wait to the end of my life. I don't want to hold back all the time. Let's you and I have a willingness to share more love in our hearts and souls. And so that's why I'm making the topic love tonight. Make a commitment to yourself that you want to share as much love as you can with people, that you can open your heart and really become a living emissary of divine grace. And I sometimes think in the world, we're afraid that we might look stupid to other people or something, or afraid we might get hurt or look stupid, either one. But really, again, it comes back to the same thing. What would you rather do? I mean, live protecting yourself your whole life and then never actually know that great love and never share it with other people? So my dream, and my goal, and my purpose is to open my heart to God's infinite love the best I possibly can. To drop as many defenses in my life to God's love as I can. And to let God express through my life as much as I can. And in doing that, I will tell you, by doing that in my life, it has allowed my life to become a very happy life. It doesn't mean there aren't any disappointments. It doesn't mean there aren't challenges. But you know what I will tell you is when you let love come into your heart and soul, then even the things that could seem significant or serious or reversals, a lot of them just sort of go right off your back like water off of a duck's back. It doesn't affect you. It's a change in perspective. I've seen people that have serious illnesses, and somehow they've gotten filled up with the divine love, that they're literally radiant sources of infinite love. These same people that are experiencing divine grace. So no matter who you are and where you are, I invite you tonight to open your heart and soul and mind to the infinite love of God. Let it come through your heart. And if you're listening right now, You can play an experiment with me if you'd like. The experiment is that you, as a divine being, and I, as a divine being, in God's divine world, have the ability to share divine love with each other and other people too. And Jesus talked a lot about it. He says, where two or more gathered, there also is God. So right now, wherever you are, whatever is going on in your life, right this second, no matter what you think your body looks like or what your condition is, Leroy was saying he's been dealing with AZ, which I'm assuming is Alzheimer's. I open your heart, Leroy, wherever you are, to letting God's infinite love broadcast through you. Matter of fact, you're reminding me. I watched a video of a guy who I watched and studied for a while. His name was Ram Dass, and he got sort of into the Indian path. He was raised Jewish, but got into the Indian path. And he ended up having a bad stroke, and then lived with the effects of a bad stroke for about 20 years. And there's a whole video about him. It's about an hour long. I saw it on Netflix. And he really was very limited. He was in a wheelchair, he had difficulty moving, but he said that so much love came into his heart and so much joy came into his soul that he says he actually wished other people to know the love, not the stroke, but the love that he knew, even in the state of that disability. Because he said it was so strong for him and so great. So there's a guy that suffered a lot of pain, a lot of restriction, and for, I'm going to say 20 years, I think it was about 20 years, certainly 15 anyway, lived with the consequences of this very severe stroke, had to kind of learn how to talk again. And he'd been a public speaker most of his life. And yet somehow, this is where your response is our response is our responsibility. He was able to take that and turn it into a blessing in his life. And it's interesting, he moved to Maui, and he would go down in the ocean all the time. His helpers would help him go down and float in the ocean. And I mean, there are all sorts of possibilities opened up in his life because he didn't give up and he kept seeking God's grace. So wherever you are, whatever's happening in your life, I want you to know God's infinite love is with you right now. And there's an opportunity for you to know something greater than you might have ever known. Tonight, this very moment, the living Spirit of God seeks to express itself through you, for you, as you, in this moment. You wouldn't be listening to the show if you didn't have some interest in that. So each one of you, I simply pray right now that any veil that separates you from the full grace of God's love be lifted now. And I pray that for all of us, and basically any soul anywhere on this earth that truly seeks the grace and love of God. A lot of people think it's kind of corny to seek God or kind of an illusion. But I'll tell you what, if you actually start to experience that infinite love, guess what? It won't seem like an illusion anymore. If you start to feel that love pouring through your heart and soul, it will no longer seem like an illusion. It will seem real. And that's what you and I, and not just, it won't seem real, it is real. And what I would tell you, and I do tell you, for me anyway, it's the most real force. Divine love is the abiding truth of life. It's the abiding gift of existence. And it's available to you and I in every single breath we take, every single moment. But we have to be like the story goes, we have to seek God as much as a drowning man would seek air. You can imagine if somebody's drowning in a river or something, they're going to seek air with all their heart and soul, right? Well, so they got to get another breath of air. Well, if you sought God the same way in all the different parts of your life and tried to see God's grace flowing through every part of your life and sought it, your God, with all your mind, heart, and soul, which is very biblical what I'm saying. Seek God first. Seek the kingdom of God first, and I'll also be added to you. So if you were to do that, my friends, then you know what? You would start to feel a love coming through your life that you didn't think was possible. And sooner or later, what you'll start to notice is that your life is permeated with love. Your life is permeated with joy. The healing starts to enter your life. Balance starts to enter your life. Are you open to those things? We have to be open. You know, there's no saying God can knock at your door, but you've got to open it. It's up to you and I. At least as I understand God, God does not force God's self upon you. If you don't want God's grace, God will leave you alone for a long time. But I can tell you this, and I say a long time because life will usually set it up some way or another that you will end up seeking God anyway. But I can tell you this, if you want a happy life, the sooner you try to seek God, the happier you'll be. If you want to have a happy experience on this earth, the sooner you realize that God and the love of God is your answer, then the sooner that you will find great happiness. So wherever and whatever is happening with you right now tonight, whatever your story is, we all have a story. Every human being has a story. Every single human being has a story. We all live in mortal bodies that are subject to aches and pains and, dysfunction occasionally. And yet even there, like my friend, like Ram Dass, who had this very bad stroke, had new great joy. Another friend of mine has a serious case of Parkinson's and falls on his face when I've been with him a number of times, and very difficult for him. Yet he has a wonderful attitude. I said, well, has it affected your faith in God? He goes, oh no, my faith in God has gotten stronger. So that's the mystery of life. Two people can face the same experience, and one loses their faith, the other person's faith becomes stronger. How does that happen? So tonight I want to just say, the purpose of tonight is to say, hey, there's a love that we can share over this whole world that can and will change the whole world when it becomes ignited. It just will. It's on its way. That's number one. Number two, we need to have a journey of faith. And I want to say this to you. The idea that some people try to live without God, or they have different stories or why they don't want to seek God. But what I want to say to you is that life is much more difficult if you're not seeking God. Life is a greater struggle. By the way, I think the mic is actually on down there in the radio station. You might want to mute that. Ashley, I could hear a little noise. No, that's all right. No, it's very mild, believe me. But still, wanted to let you know. So we're going to go to a break now. We'll be back in just a moment. This is the Gateway Show. And hold on, okay? I'll be with you in just a moment. This is Robert Sidell. In fact, I'll stay with you on the Facebook. So my friends, I'm always trying to focus my mind. So here you and I, this is a moment in time. And here's the weird thing about life. All of you know this intellectually. All of us always live in now all the time. And we can't go back to the beginning of the show. We can't go back to 5 minutes ago. We can't go back to yesterday. We can't correct the problems of yesterday. But, sometimes we can do some things to work on them, but still, we got to do it in the present moment. But what you and I can do right now, in this present moment, is open ourselves to the connection of divine love that we share with one another. Right this second. And open your heart right now as we're speaking to one another. This moment in time. And see what you can do. See if you can feel that. Leroy, James, whoever's listening right now, Marianne, Ernie, any of you listening, open your heart right now to infinite love, divine grace. Open your heart to the idea that you're part of an experience that's so divine that if you could understand it, you wouldn't believe it. In fact, if you got a dose of divine love, for most of us, we might not know how to handle it. So whatever's going on in your life right now, let's dare to know that all things are in God's divine grace. Let's dare to feel that love right now, no matter what's happening. Let's dare to know that God is good. I am good. By that I'm saying the eternal I am presence, not me, Robert Sidell, I'm talking about, but the eternal I am presence of God is referred to as the I am that I am, as they refer to in lots of different religions. That eternal presence that gives you consciousness, gives you a chance. Thanks, James. James, we get used to seeing ourselves. We're used to ourselves. But what if, James, if when we look in the mirror, we see a being that's filled with love. We see a being filled with light. We see a being charged with light. What if you could see that? And what if you go into your day knowing wherever you go, there's an aura of love and light around you, and that you're sharing love wherever you go, in small and big ways, it doesn't matter. You're letting God work that out. Who would you be and what would you be if you decided to really go out on a limb and create true faith in God. Beyond every story, every tradition, just a direct experience of God's infinite love. Not rejecting stories and traditions, but just getting a true experience of God's infinite love. Each of you, it's fun. I mean, when we're here doing this, I think it would actually surprise you and maybe even shock you how much love and joy and grace I feel when I'm doing this show. It actually pleasantly and happily shocks me lots of times. Okay, my friends, we'll be back on the air in just a second. Good evening, my friends. This is Robert Sidell. A great pleasure to be with you here on this Sunday night, the first weekend of March 2024. And I'm just talking about, there's three things I really want to say tonight. Very simple. I'm trying to keep it simple. Each year I get older, I'm trying to simplify things more. One, we want an experience of love, a divine love, that fills our heart and soul and makes us happy. That's a simplistic idea, and that love can spread over the whole world. I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. The love I'm speaking of can transform and will transform the quality of the world. I'm absolutely certain. That's number one. And each one of us has the ability to have that awakened in us and then shared from us. Okay, the second thing I want to say is faith. Just the idea, what was that? Noise suddenly made a noise. I don't know what that was. Each one of us has the ability, my friends, to grow in our relationship to God. Now, really, the two are interconnected between love and God. But in our society today, it's kind of a popular idea. Well, I don't need God, and God's just a crutch, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what I would say to you is that it's not a crutch at all. It's actually part of the awakening of who you are. And to try to live in this life without trusting in God is so much more difficult. Let's say somebody encounters a layoff, which, by the way, I talk about in my book, The Gateway. I'll show you a picture of it again. Available on Amazon.com, by the way, or in my office, either way. The Gateway. So what I talk about it in there, that when I first came to Vegas, I was here about 8 months and I got laid off. And I had no job, didn't hardly know anybody. I had to decide. I'd gone through a spiritual awakening a couple of years earlier, and I thought, well, this is my chance to see if any of this stuff makes any sense. Here I was in a city, only people I knew I'd met over the last 8 months, and I thought, and I didn't know anybody, had no savings to speak of because I'd only worked there a short period of time, and I wasn't even working in a high-paying job, but I decided to say, okay, I'm going to trust. I'm going to trust that God can guide me through this, and that's the gift of having faith. Without faith, what do you have? You have panic, you have fear, you have worry. Now, even with faith doesn't mean you don't get scared sometimes, but at least you have access to a resource, and you trust that God can open doors that nobody could figure out. That God has ways that could never be figured out. So for me, when I got laid off, there was like 200 people got laid off from the DA's office, the district attorney's office where I was working, or from the county or something. There was a large group of people laid off. There was a voter rollback, and I was one of them. So I decided, okay, I got a creativity board. I put pictures on it. I thought, I'm going to live in faith. I'm going to speak positively. I'm going to act positively. I chose not to go on unemployment, but rather just to see if I could just move forward without that. And I'm putting that down. But I figured, what am I going to do if I'm sitting at home on unemployment? It's not going to help me. So then out of the blue, somebody came to me and says they knew an attorney that had 2 weeks worth of work. 2 weeks. And if I wanted to work with him. I thought, well, 2 weeks is better than nothing. I mean, it gave me a chance to get started. Started working with this guy. Very nice guy. And it's funny because about a week or so after I started there, he came in and said to me with kind of a funny look on his face, he goes, well, my partner just told me he's leaving. So I'm going to move offices. And if you want to share offices with me, when we find a new office, I'd be willing to let you have an office for free until you can start paying me rent. So he wasn't giving me a job. He just said I could have a free office. Well, remember, I started on a miraculous journey. Well, that's pretty miraculous. Suddenly, I have the ability to, I've been offered a free office space, and we got to choose the office together. It was a pretty little building, and I got my own office for free. Now, that doesn't happen every day. What? Out of nowhere? I started with a 2-week job. One attorney left. The other attorney offered me a job. We actually became very good friends, and I shared office space with him for about 3 years. and I started to build my own practice. But I started with free rent. Now, remember, I started as an experiment to see, can you trust in God? Can God really supply us what we need? So I got, without any plans, a 2-week job turned into a chance to get free office space. And then about a month and a half later, as part of a church, somebody referred a case to me. Somebody referred a case to me, a personal injury case. And I really, because I had nothing but time and I had no cases at all, hardly. So I went out and drove around everywhere. I drove to the hospital, the doctors, all these different places. I got the case settled like in about 2.5 months, got it completely settled, had a very happy client, and made my first fee in my own private practice. And guess what? When I got that fee, I still remember that day very well, I was able to turn around and start paying rent to the guy I was in the office building with. So remember, 2 or 3 months earlier, I'd been laid off, did not know what was going to happen, was facing the uncertainties of being in a town I didn't know anybody in. How would I support myself? What would I do? All the fears that we can have as human beings. And yet somehow, I just decided I'm going to trust in faith because this is my chance to trust in faith. So I chose to trust in faith. And the next thing you know, I had that office. The next thing you know, I had some money coming in. It wasn't a lot, but I had just enough to start paying him rent. And then some way or another, I started getting more business. And I get referrals from here and referrals from there. And next thing you know, I started to have some pretty successful business. So now here's the amazing thing. By the end of the first year in that office, I was making more than the job I had at the DA's office. And more than, let's just say I was making a good income for me at that time in my life. And so it went from nothing to making a good income. So that was very exciting for me suddenly. But what was really exciting about that was that I was able to live on faith. I was able to reach to God and trust in God and derive my sustenance and well-being and future from God. And I've never backed down on that in my life. I've had some significant reversals at different points. Let's see. So sometimes I've encountered reversals, errors, mistakes, loss of employees, whatever, all the different things you can have. But you know what, my friends? I kept trusting to God all the time, just like today. Matter of fact, it's never stopped. We're still in that same journey. I'll tell you what, faith in God. So I started out by saying, let's open our hearts to love, a love that will change our lives forever. The second thing I said is, let's open ourselves to the idea that we really need a relationship to God. I accept Christ. I accept Jesus Christ and His grace. I seek it. I know it. I accept it. And each one of you has to find your own path. I don't try to push that on anybody here. All I say is, seek God with all of your heart and let God do the rest. Hey, Yvette, nice to see you there. I like that. Nice French name. Chevalier or something like that. I like that. So what I'm going to say to you is the adventure of this life, if we see it on the highest levels, how to move from having what some teachings call mortal consciousness, where we totally are worried about manipulating the physical world and become insecure and fearful and anxious all the time. Okay, that's the normal way of living on earth, I think, for most of us. And we all go through that phase. But what about shifting? Where you begin to say, hey, there's another possibility. And the analogy I give in my book, it's like riding a bicycle. How many of you listening know how to ride a bicycle? Well, I'm going to assume that every one of you can. But most of you probably remember. Do any of you remember when you first started to ride a bicycle? First, it was kind of scary. Remember, you tried to ride a bicycle, and the next thing you know, you could fall. I mean, it was scary. I mean, you're bouncing one direction, going to the other. In my case, my dad was running next to me, trying to catch me a little bit, and then suddenly, at some point, I went on ahead of him, and you're always afraid of what's going to happen. You're on this little bicycle, and you're so young, you're not smart enough to even be scared, really, although you should be a little bit scared. And then suddenly you're riding it. Do any of you remember that experience? The sudden sense of thrill. Hey, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Well, that's kind of what it was like for me when I got laid off and I started to trust God as my source. And I'm reaffirming that tonight for each and every one of you, including me. That, by the way, that can include every part of your life, not just jobs. Let me give you an example. That can include relationships. You'll have the right friends. You'll have the right romantic relationships. It could also mean you could have the right doctors when you need a doctor. It could mean that you have the right place to live when you need a place to live. It could mean that you will be given exactly what you need when you need it. And if you could begin to trust that, then you see how life is suddenly a new game, like that kid riding a bicycle. It's like, wait a minute, I'm living an experience that I can actually trust in the living power of God to guide me moment by moment. And then when that starts to happen, it gives you a confidence and assurance that's almost unbelievable. Ernie's saying he learned to ride a bike when you were 14. Wow, Ernie, that's pretty old, actually. That's interesting. We'll talk about that when we get into the next section of the show. So, my friends, so that's the first thing. Love, let that infinite love come into your heart. It's beyond all things known to man. Let God express through you as you. 2, recognize you need a relationship to God. It makes life much easier, much happier, much healthier, and it makes life much more rewarding. And the third thing I want to say is this is so important. Easy to talk about, but practice forgiveness. I talk about it a lot, but it's true. It's kind of the secret sauce of life. Love and forgiveness are the secret sauces of life. You need to forgive yourself and others all the time, and probably yourself more than anybody. You could probably, some of you right this second could look back and say, gosh, I should have done this one thing differently or something else. Now, even that's sometimes an illusion, but it doesn't matter. You still need to forgive yourself and then forgive everybody else involved in the story too. Hey, Barb, it's good to see you. We all need to do that, my friends. I think forgiveness, I was saying this to somebody the other day, I actually believe forgiveness is probably the single greatest invention of mankind. As you live on this earth, you're going to misstep. You're going to make mistakes. Things happen. Unless you can forgive others and yourself, you're going to be trapped. But if you can get in the spirit of forgiveness and say, not hold on to condemnation of yourself or others, that unlocks the power of God to make the crooked road straight, to fix the mistakes, and guide you to a future. So love, faith, and forgiveness. Those 3 things. We start dwelling on that. But remember, it's a real God. It's a real love. If you get into a real relationship to God, not a story, this world can become heaven on earth for you. All right, we're going to go to a break. And when we come back, we'll have Reverend Ernie there. Maybe Reverend Janet too. I'm not quite sure. We'll find out. But definitely Reverend Ernie. So stay tuned, my friends. I'll be back in just a moment. Yeah, Marianne saying, we choose love or fear. Absolutely, Marianne. Absolutely. And it's always a choice. But remember, Marianne, we have to be loving to ourselves too, because sometimes we are fearful, and sometimes Jesus calls the old man. Remember, Nicodemus came to him, and Jesus said, you have to be born again to know the kingdom of heaven. And Nicodemus says to him, well, wait a minute. How can I be born again? I'm old now. My mother's not even alive, or she's old. I can't be born from her again. Well, obviously what he was trying to say is you have to be born into a new spirit of consciousness. And so you and I, what we need to do is keep opening ourselves. The old self, the old man is fearful, insecure, can be jealous and vindictive and all that stuff. And it doesn't necessarily mean we totally move beyond that self, but we begin to grow beyond it. So it may still be there, but its voice becomes quieter and the voice of God becomes louder. So what I'm suggesting to each of you, and it's so good for me to be sharing this to you, because I've got to remember this all the time too. Life isn't like you do it yesterday and it's all handled. It's like riding a bicycle. You got to, each day you're on a bicycle, you got to keep balancing it, right? Well, it's no different. When you are living your life, you have to keep looking to God all the time. I don't care if you're 80, if you're 60 or 20, it doesn't make any difference. You have to keep looking to God and trusting that God will guide you. But if you could come into a relationship with God where you really have faith, think how much better your life could be. Think how much more wonderful it could be. How much happier it could be. And that's my invitation to each one of you. Let this be the night where you make that true, that real. Let the infinite love of God be your sustenance, your soul support, your grace, your freedom. Discover something magical and wonderful about life that maybe you never knew. And yes, I'm just, let's see here. I just had somebody else on there. I don't know what happened to it. But it's exciting. And fall in love. The kind of love I'm talking about is falling in love. Actually, we have about 30 seconds more. Think about it, my friends. Leroy saying his translated hands on me about 5 years ago and he felt healed, but the chemical spinal tap revealed it's still active. Well, okay, so there's a lot of different theories about spiritual healing, and I study them all the time. My mother was a spiritual healer, and I'm sure she taught me a lot. In fact, even though she's passed from her body probably 15 to 18 years ago, I had to figure out the exact date, almost close to 20 years ago now. But Still, I receive guidance and love from her all the time. All the time. I'm sure some of you feel the same way in your family, your loved ones. And she was a real healer. And I'm sure she healed me many times. I'm very, very lucky, my friends. I've had dear friends that I guarantee, have healed me many, many times. And that's what this show really is. Hey, Ernie, there you are. Can you hear me, Ernie?
Yes, I can hear you, Robert.
Perfect. Okay, we're going back on the radio, my friends. Good evening, this is Robert Sidell. Welcome you back to the Gateway Show on every Sunday night, 6 to 7 p.m., AM 840. And this is the number one talk station. And I'm also simulcasting on Facebook. You can share it with your friends on Facebook. Also, it's on YouTube now. Just type in Gateway Podcast or Gateway Miracle Podcast or put my name Sidell in. But you'll know when you found it. You'll see my face looking at you. By the way, that's one of the things that takes a little bit of humility on this kind of thing. You see your face, and sometimes, I think my face should look different, or this or that, but it doesn't matter. You start laughing at it. You start laughing at the whole story, right? Be more self-accepting. We all have an idea how we're supposed to be. And so, especially on YouTube, they get these funny expressions on your face. Sometimes they catch just the wrong expression, but it's okay. It's all right. So my friends, what was I going to say? So I just want you to know, I'm really excited tonight as I sit here with you. I feel the divine love. I feel that grace. And now for each one of you that wants it, you can keep growing in it, and so can I. And you're reminding me, sometimes we have to remind ourselves. Sometimes in our lives we're more in the zone than other times. You probably know what I'm talking about, each of you. And so, when I was just first looking for that new job, to know what to do, the ability to trust and let that unfold right in front of me, that was an excitement beyond anything you could ever imagine. And sometimes that you get in just in the routine of doing your life, and I'm still always turning it to God, but I reaffirm tonight that I can do the very same thing in every way. And what I want to reaffirm to all of you is that there are new doorways opening up. For you, Leroy, there may be healings that you could never imagine. Marianne, you're going to choose love and let love into your life. Why not? Life's too short not to. And Yvette, the same with you. Leroy, every one of you. James, the same with you. All right, Reverend Ernie, what do you got for us there tonight? It's nice to see you.
All right, thank you, Robert. The topic of the prayer is love is the answer we have been looking for. Dear Lord, thank you for giving us this blessed day. Lord, guide us to recognize and inspire our inner creative attributes to fulfill your plan for us in our journey through this precious and adventurous life. We pray for each one of us to seek continuously the answers to love in our hearts, the good that is love, joy, compassion, kindness, and help us share and serve those God given attributes to those that need our support unconditionally. We recognize your eternal love for all mankind and be in awareness of God's grace filled with love that's available to all to accept. Guide us to spread our inner love with our loved ones, friends, communities, and around the world, creating heaven on earth. And so it is. Amen.
Ernie, what a beautiful prayer. It's funny because I only give you the general outline and you kind of tune in and what you put in your prayer is exactly what we've been talking about in this hour. It's funny. It's almost like we coordinated on all the details, isn't it?
Thank you.
And, Ernie, I'll tell you what, I've got these wonderful people, James, Leroy, Marianne, all these different people on here. I want to say something to you. I'm just reminded. By the way, I'm not sure everybody knows this, so I just want to say this for all of us in general. There's an adventure in God, an excitement in God that's beyond any human understanding. And when we really get into that flow, it's like our life becomes empowered and exciting and it turns into an adventure. And it's like fun and exciting, And so part of why I'm doing this show is it's my way to remind myself, but it's a little bit more than that. It is to remind me, but it's more than that. By you and I joining, you, James, Leroy, all of you that are on there, Ernie, Yvette, by sharing consciousness of love, we actually are healing each other. So for you, I send out Leroy, I see you as healthy, whole, and complete. And for Marianne, I see love surrounding you. in Barb, I see, I've known you for a long time. And I'm laughing back. You and I have known each other over 20 years now, probably 24 or 25 years now. So some of you have known for a long time. And the bottom line is, let's get the most out of life. Let's make sure we don't leave any gifts inside the package. Let's unwrap the package. I think there's a guy named Leo Buscaglia. Probably most of you don't even remember him now. He's passed away a long time ago. But he said a lot of life is like getting Christmas gifts, but many times we get the gifts, we don't even take the time to unwrap the gifts. So I want you to think to yourself that God's got gifts waiting for you right now. Surprises, even at this moment, surprises that are going to come into your life that you couldn't expect, that are better for you than you could imagine. New possibilities, new places to travel to, new friends, all sorts of new adventures that you couldn't even plan. You couldn't begin to plan. That God has a future waiting for you that's so much better than you could ever dream of. You don't have to carry the burden of that on your soul. When I got laid off, I could have just fallen into fear and anxiety. Said, I better move back home, back to California. Instead, I decided to see if I could really trust God to open every door. And you know what? I've never stopped doing that ever since then till today. And now listen to this. This is hard to believe. That's about 40 years ago now. It's hard for me to believe. About 40 years ago. So for 40 years ago, I've been doing this thing. And listen, sometimes better than other times. Look, sometimes you're riding the bicycle and sometimes you crash the bicycle. Then you got to get back up and dust yourself off and start riding forward again. Right, Ernie? Is that true?
That's true. I fell many times while I was practicing.
Yeah, I remember that. It's funny, you said that you learned when you were 14 years old?
Yes, 14 in the dormitory. I was in the hostel in South India. Yeah.
Wow. So what was that like? I mean, that's older than most people. You probably were a little more afraid of falling at that age. Was it hard for you?
It was a little bit, but I had friends, the peers, that were encouraging me to get on the bike, start learning, which I did. Then did ride the bike a few distances, like 10 miles, 15 miles during weekends.
You rode your bike 15 miles?
Oh, yeah, yeah. One
Wow.
city to another city, like maybe about 10 miles at least, one way, yes.
And you just recently went back to India. What about, was it 6 months
Yes,
ago?
3 months ago.
Oh,
3 months
3 months
ago.
ago.
Yeah, my Denise and my older son Steve. Yes, 3 months ago.
Isn't it funny? Destiny is a very strange thing. And you could have ended up living your whole life there, and your life would have been very different, wouldn't it?
Oh yes, it would be very different. As you know that I left India when I was 18 years old. So here I'm 78. That
So
was 60
that's
years ago.
60 years ago. Wow.
Right.
And so, but you've had a good life here in the United States, haven't you?
Oh yes, wonderful. God has blessed me with a wonderful life and wonderful family, wonderful wife and children and grandchildren. Yes.
See, that's what hits me tonight, Ernie. We need to up level our hope and expectation and truth that our story in God can be more than just kind of a soothing comfort, but it can be a wonderful, exciting adventure. And here you are,
Yes.
78, and I'm 71, and I'll be
Yeah,
72 in a few months. But guess what? Even today, at our age, the best is yet to come. And
that's right.
that's what we have to remember. And oh, the music is coming. I'm afraid we're out of time. But Ernie, you did a beautiful prayer. I really appreciate it. All my friends out there, may God bless you, lift you up, heal you, deliver you into a whole new beginning. Let's remember, God is real, miracles are real, and the best is yet to come. God bless you all. This is Robert Sidell. Till next week.